All right, picture this. Buying or selling a house in Connecticut is like navigating a maze, and having a lawyer is like having a seasoned guide who knows all the twists and turns. It's not just a safety net, it's your secret weapon. I'm Tricia Farin, Realtor with William Ravis in Newtown, Connecticut, and you're watching Keeping the Real in Real Estate, a podcast dedicated to giving you real insight into what is really happening in the real estate market. Real estate stuff can get messy, and Connecticut has its own set of rules that can make your head spin. That's where having a cool and savvy lawyer comes in. And speaking of cool and savvy lawyers, I would like to introduce you to Dan Murtha. Dan has been an attorney for 9 years and is an expert on real estate law. He's a family man married to his wife, Sam, and has 2 small children. With living and working right in Newtown, his community ties are strong. Dan is my go-to attorney for everything real estate. We've done countless deals together, and I just love working with him because he knows his stuff and can explain it in a way that both me and my clients can understand. He is a great communicator and has the likability factor, and you just can trust him and feel good about the service he delivers. Welcome, Dan, and thank you for joining the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. That introduction, I feel like I shouldn't say anything and just sit here and sign off after that kind intro.
Well, you can take a couple of bows if you'd like, or clap. Let's dig right into it. So how would you describe your role as the real estate attorney in the closing process, and how do you ensure a smooth transaction?
So great question. Obviously looking at a buyer and a seller, it's 2 different jobs, but overall my most important job in my mind and my firm's mind is the protection of the client, right? Because, we're going to sign a contract for the most expensive thing probably anybody's ever purchased in their life or sold in their life. And we're doing these transactions, signing contracts on Saturdays, Sundays, nights, weekends, and closing in 45 days, which if you really think about the big picture of that, it's kind of ridiculous, right? So the most important thing to me is, getting involved from the beginning, going over those, contracts, discussing with people, reviewing with people, and understand what we're really doing. I mean, that's the most important job in my mind of what we do and what you do as a team.
Perfect. Well, having been an attorney for 9 years, I'm sure you've seen a lot, and the stories you can tell would keep us here for the next 3 days. But what would you say now are the most common pitfalls that buyers and sellers are encountering? And what recommendations do you have to protect them against these pitfalls?
That's a really good question because there's so many different levels of pitfalls and issues you're running into. Um, and one of the biggest things I have been seeing is people jumping into things without complete knowledge, right? And a lot of agents and team members are really good about getting people set up, but I think no matter who you are, it's just about asking questions and being informed before you go into something. And I think, as I said, you would explain the process to someone before you even go make an offer, before you list a home. But it's really listening and getting advice from your team and being able to follow it, right? And I think that's the biggest pitfall people have is just, going through the steps in the process with that. And again, being realistic, because again, the market, as we all know, is all over the place for, good, bad, whatever side you're on. But that's really the biggest thing is having the realistic expectations as well.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot where you have people who think that they know what they're doing because they've done it before. And then you have the complete opposite of people who don't have a clue because they've never done it and they rely on every single piece of information that you give them. But
Right.
digesting it and understanding it and knowing how to use that information, I think is kind of what role we play in trying to make that clear to them. So I always
Right.
appreciate when I know that I can bounce ideas off of you and
Absolutely.
have a different perspective of how it's explained, just so that you also they get it from the legal side. Tricky.
It is.
So when you're thinking of sellers and buyers as 2 different components to this, what legal obligations do the sellers have that are different from what the buyers have to deal with?
Yeah, so again, as far as legal obligation goes, one of the hardest thing about any real estate contract, if it's a broker contract, attorney contract, and I could speak contracts for days and days, as you know, and I'll have fun with it. But as a buyer, you have a lot more to worry about throughout the process. You have your inspections you're going to do, the contingencies and the dates, your mortgage you have to get approved, going through that process. And as far as legality goes, you have to understand the dates and work toward those dates, and understand where at what point you could lose your deposit, because that's really what a buyer is risking, is the money they're putting down, and can they meet these dates, and etc. As a seller, and we've seen this happen over the past few years as well, they get into a deal, sign a contract, ready to sell, and then they go, you know what, we don't want to sell anymore. And they don't understand that, and it's happened just multiple times, that you can't just walk away from a deal, right? You are legally obligated to sell, and the other party, the buyer, could sue you for what's called specific performance to make you sell the property. So again, you understanding that you're in a contract, you're obligated to sell this person as long as they follow their parts of the contract. So two very different sides of the transaction, but again, everyone has their job and their obligations. Seller usually waits a little more for the buyer to get theirs done, and there's waiting to sell, and the buyer has to work hard to get to that point to be able to sell. Is that a fair answer?
It is, I saw a lot of times, especially during COVID, where buyer's remorse was what was used as the reason as the property went back on the market. And at what
Yep.
stage does buyer's remorse not play a role? If you're saying that there's certain conditions that they have to meet and deadlines, with people making offers over asking and trying to do everything they can to get these properties, at what point can they say, oh my gosh, I made a mistake, and still do so and not feel in jeopardy for their deposit?
Well, I mean, so really, from my point of view, two times in the contract, you really could get out scot-free. Is it fair or not to the seller? Probably not, but you have your 5-day attorney review in most contracts in Connecticut. We know the brokers have, says during the first 5 business days of signing this contract, you cancel the deal. Either attorney could cancel the deal. There's more language to it, but that's essentially what it says. And you don't have to have a reason, is my view. Attorneys disagree with that, but it always comes down to 5-day right for attorney review. Then you have your inspection contingency, where during inspections you go into the house and you're going to find something wrong with the new construction, old house, anything. And at that point you can walk away because the inspections weren't satisfactory. So those are 2 times in theory. I wouldn't use the term, you could go to the other party and say I have buyer's remorse, but say under these terms of the contract, we're canceling the deal. Once you get to the mortgage contingency, you really do, again, we could talk about this for days and days too, but in theory, you have to be denied a mortgage in order to just walk away, which is, knock on wood, pretty rare, because most people are pretty well qualified or pre-approved before they go into that process. And most loan officers aren't going to give a false rejection, because it's, number one, illegal. Number two, it's going to look bad on their reputation as well if they give out false denial letters. So I would say those first two contingencies are really your get out of jail free card,
Okay.
for lack of a better term.
What about the seller? Can they back out at any point without any kind of liability?
And again, so this is for a long conversation too. So they do have the 5-day attorney review if they use that certain contract. If they're not in contract yet and just use a simple offer to purchase, they could cancel during that period. A longer conversation as well is if during the inspection period, if the buyers say, hey, we would like you to fix the washing machine, and they say, nope, we're not fixing it, we're canceling the deal. We've seen that before. Is that a guaranteed way to get out? I think it's a little gray and a little hard to make that choice. But again, my view is the sellers have that 5-day attorney review or pre-contract period.
Let's say there's a situation where there's an offer and a counter offer. As the 2 parties are negotiating, is that nullifying the previous offer and its terms? Like, what happens if in the middle of negotiation, another offer comes in and the seller wants to negotiate that one?
So again, I think that's a wonderful question, and it's a question we fortunately or unfortunately see a lot. I don't think I have a perfect answer, because again, as you said, you have an offer, you have an accepted offer. Then when you're doing inspections, even though you're allowed to do inspections per contract, and you ask someone to go back and say, okay, fix the washing machine, my view and every attorney's view is it is a counter offer. So again, in theory, you are renegotiating the deal, therefore the contract. So if you get another offer $50,000 higher, can you just say, never mind, I'm not fixing the dryer, that's a counter offer, canceling your deal, taking the other offer? Great to me, to be honest, because again, can you just if you go back to the person and say, we're not doing it, okay, I don't want anything done, I'll take the house as is. Maybe, depending how it was asked, worded, etc. I don't think there's a perfect answer, but have I seen it? Of course I have. Have I seen people end up in litigation over this exact question? Of course. Um, Again, during the pandemic, really deep pandemic times, we were seeing this on a daily basis because prices were rising, people are throwing higher offers. So again, perfect answer, I don't have a perfect answer for you.
So as a realtor and offering advice to your client, what would be the best way, both kinds, seller and buyer, what would be the best thing to tell them so that they don't lose a deal, but would still like to be able to negotiate?
Um, and again, I don't want to go too far on giving like definite legal advice so people follow it and say, Dan, you gave us this advice on this podcast. But again, and maybe you could even answer this one too and speak this. I think from what I see in our community, it's a lot of conversations, right? In certain communities up in Harford County, you're seeing, unsatisfactory inspection addendum saying, okay, we're not buying the house unless you do X, Y, Z. That's a pretty clear counteroffer. I think what we see more is a simple email to the other agent, a text, a phone call saying, hey, we did inspections, we want this and this. Maybe that's a safer way to kind of beat around the bush of a counteroffer. But again, I think there's nothing perfect to be guaranteed other than waiving all inspections, taking the house as is.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be tricky. And, we're told, obviously, we have to work within our license. So we don't want to be giving any legal advice, and we want to
Right,
make sure that the actual documents that we're using has the language in it, which I guess is where the attorney review comes in.
right.
Yeah. So with that in mind, what legal protections are in place for me as a realtor? Like if in case a buyer encounters issues post-sale and seeks legal action, am I at risk for anything?
So as far as protecting yourself as a realtor, I don't think there is a perfect answer because as we've seen, and we've seen this during the pandemic and post-pandemic, because we saw a lot of inspections being waived, we did see people getting sued, um, agents being sued, saying, "Oh, you should have told me to do inspections," or "You should have told me not to waive my mortgage contingency because you knew there was a risk." How would you know that? I don't know. Again, we advise our clients, you advise your clients to the best of your ability, and they can make any choices they want. So, what I always suggest to everybody is put everything in writing. So again, so they can't ever say, you say, "Hey, I suggest you get inspections." No, we don't want to get them. We don't want to lose the house, right? And then again, could they sue you still? Of course they can.
So for me, I don't think I've ever sold a house to a buyer that didn't do inspections, even in new construction. But we do put into the offer that inspections are for informational purposes only. So if we say that, where we're not expecting the seller to make any kind of changes based on any findings that we have in the inspection period,
Mhm.
are we still allowing that component to say we can walk if we're not satisfied with those inspections, or does that take away that right?
Oh no, absolutely. 'Cause again, the standard contract that we see a lot, the 4-pager, has paragraph 9 in it, which is the inspection contingency, allowing you to do inspections. And you go down, I think it's paragraph 23 maybe, and then it says that you have a right to cancel this if you're on satisfactory inspection, as long as you fill it out. They're going to do inspections for certain things and get them done before that certain date. Yes, you can still absolutely walk away, even if they're for informational purposes only.
That's great. Oh, that one can be confusing at times. So I'm
Oh,
glad to know that.
absolutely, it can be.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you some questions about title, because I know that there's been some situations where there's been some fraudulent activity going out there, and
Lots.
people are selling properties they don't own. And so, can you talk a little bit about the importance of the title? Why do we have to do a title search? Why does it have to be done with every single transaction of that property? And what we can look to get out of doing that?
Yeah, so again, as far as a fraud goes, the title search isn't that great because all it shows is who owns it, right? But the reason we really do a title search is to make sure that who really owns the property, um, the spelling of their name, make sure that everything, all the transfers are correct, who signs the new deed transferring out is the right person, is there any liens, mortgages, restrictions on the property we need to know about, any old unreleased mortgages, which we see on one of every 2 or 3 sales, which when you sell your house, the mortgage is paid off, then the bank doesn't record a release of the mortgage, which so in theory it's still an active mortgage even though it's paid off. Um, so the reason we do title searches is that right there, to make sure that the property and title is clear and clean and able to transfer. It also shows, if John Doe and Jane Doe own a property and one of them pass, have they done all the necessary stuff for probate to make sure they could transfer it.
Excellent. So my last question is, just in general, what's your approach to communicating and collaborating with all the parties that are involved? Because I know there's usually the lender, there's the other attorney, and there's the other agents. There's a lot of moving parts here. So you, as Dan Murtha attorney, what's your philosophy with communication and your approach to getting everything done smoothly?
Well, as you know, with my clients, my agents, my team, what I call them, loan officers, my cell phone is always available. My wife loves that it's always ringing on the weekends. But it's as I said, and I really do mean it. Number one, I love what I do. Number two, that these are the biggest transactions and the quickest transaction anyone's gonna ever do. So if you feel worried, scared, nervous, you have my cell phone. Emails, I'm always on. Just email, keeping the team email together so we know when you email me, hey, this is what we're doing for inspections. Let the loan officer know, okay, we're good to go forward. We'll order the title search. I have a great team that works with me. And again, I always keep my paralegals in copy. Everyone knows that if you can't get a hold of me, which you usually can, you can reach out to Nancy or Becky, depending who you're working with, and they'll get you the answer. So again, I think just more communication is better, and knowing what's going on and communicating with everyone what's going on is the most important thing. And I know you're spot on with me there too.
I absolutely, it was one of the first things that was very appealing when we spoke, because I don't like to not be in the know of what's going on. And when I speak to my clients, I want to be able to have answers to their questions, and not, that's a good question, I'll find out. I really want to have that information. And I know that's a canned response when you don't know, but I still feel embarrassed having to ever use that. And when I'm working with other parties as part of this whole process, because there are a lot of moving parts.
Right.
You, sometimes I'm corralling kittens, not always, but it's nice to know that I've got the legal side of things being taken care of. I've got the lending side taken care of, and we're all communicating, and everybody knows what's happening. And if the client calls any one of us, our stories are the same because we all are on the same page. That to me, like, helps me sleep at night.
I agree
Well, thank you so
completely.
much, Dan. The information you've provided has been invaluable, and I always love speaking with you about real estate and other fun things. And I am looking forward to many, many, many more transactions going forward.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you and you inviting me on.
Of course.
And I look forward to doing it again. We could do one with lots of stories that I can present to you too, of fraud.
Careful, I might take you up on that. Well, thank you for watching Keeping the Real in Real Estate. Until next time.